You just get All right. Again, hello, everybody. My name is Vinny Cersei. I'm the Director of Counseling and Therapeutic Services for the Norton School System. And in that role, I am also the Director of Guidance here at the high school. This is our financial aid night for 11th and 12th grade families. For those of you that might need ASL interpreters, we have one available and on the screen here. What you're going to want to do if you do need that service is you're going to want to hover over her and you'll see three little dots. You click on the three dots, and then you'll drop down, and you should see pin, and you can pin her just for your screen. Okay, so if you want to do that now while we're doing introductions, that would be great. And then I know Donald, you are going to share your screen as we get going. So I would like to welcome Donald Kerr. He's the Director of Student Lending and College Services. Did I get that right, Donald?
You did. Right on the
Oh,
money.
that's good. That's a first. I think I finally got it right. Um, Donald has been with us. I think this is 6 or 7 years ago now. I think something like that. Correct?
Yeah,
It's been a
6
while.
years.
It's been a while. And Donald keeps us up to date on the financial aid world. All of the changes he has taken us through a lot of things related to the pandemic and after the change to FAFSA, all kinds of things. I'm sure he has some updates this year, although it seems like things are running a little smoother than previous years, but that's just from my perspective. Maybe you have a different perspective. So Donald's going to do his presentation. I will probably, as usual, Donald, jump in here and there for things that are specific to Norton, especially when we get to the scholarship conversation. But other than that, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll let you share your screen, and we'll go from there.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to families about financial aid, the process of paying for college. I've been in this industry for about 25 years doing it, but most importantly, I've got 2 kids in college currently, so I'm doing it from both sides, and I love to share information that can be useful and helpful for all families. So, um, I am going to go ahead and see if I can share my screen and pull up the presentation. Okay, can you see the presentation?
We can.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to cover financial aid from a very broad perspective, but most importantly, try to teach everybody the steps they need to go through to be ready to apply for financial aid and kind of what's going to happen next in the process. So I have my contact information up here. You can see my email address, my office phone number, and my work cell phone number. If you have any questions you didn't feel comfortable asking tonight, you can always reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to follow up with you and get all your questions answered. But to kind of set the stage, what am I going to go through and what am I going to talk about? I'm going to give everybody a good overview of what is financial aid so you have a good base understanding of the entire financial aid process and see how everything flows together. I'm going to cover the types of financial aid. Then, most importantly, I'm going to talk about my 3 easy steps to help you prepare and apply for financial aid. Then we're going to talk about kind of what happens next. You filled out these applications and asked for financial aid. What's the process going to be, and what is the timeline and the milestones you need to look for? And then, if we have enough time at the end, I'm going to talk about funding college tuition. How do you pay for that big bill when it comes, as well as some cost cutting ideas. I have 2 in college. I know how expensive it can be. And there are some ways you can help save some money out there. So, I'm happy to answer people's questions at the end. So, as long as you have questions, I'm happy to stick around and answer them for everybody. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started and talk about what is financial aid. So there's 2 main types. There's merit aid and financial aid. Merit aid is kind of what it sounds like. It's based on the merits of the individual student. So these can be things like athletics, academics, demographics, but it could really be anything. The talents of the student, anything that makes them unique and stand out as who they are. So you can get help for paying for college based on those things. Good news is it is accounted for during the college admissions process. That's where Merit Aid comes into place. So you're not going to have to do any additional applications to ask for Merit Aid. Your admissions application serves as Merit Aid. And when you get those wonderful acceptance letters that say, hey, congratulations, I got into college, that's when you find out if you got any Merit Aid. You might say, hey, based on your academic achievements, congratulations, you've gotten the presidential scholarship of $10,000 per year. So Merit Aid is based on those things. But then there's also financial aid, which is kind of what it sounds like. It's based on financial factors from the student's household, such as the student's income, the parent's income, the student's assets, the parental assets. But it's also based on budgets. The federal government hands out financial aid and they have a budget. State governments hand out financial aid, they also have a budget. And then, most importantly, schools, every individual college you're thinking of attending is going to have their own budget for financial aid. And some schools have large financial aid budgets and some has very small ones. So that's really going to be the focus of my presentation, the financial aid process. That's really what I'm going to focus on tonight. So lots of myths. People hear financial aid, they hear that word and they go, oh, this is free money. It does consist of free money, which is great. There are going to be things like grants or scholarships. Anytime you hear those words, that's free money. But financial aid also consists of things like employment. There can be federal work study jobs around the college campus and financial aid loans. That is, even though it's a loan and it has to be repaid, it can be considered a type of financial aid because it comes from the federal government. So we talked about all the different sources it comes from. And there are those three main ones: the federal government, the state government, and the college themselves. But there are also outside private sources where you can look for scholarships at any point in time. So there is kind of that fourth source out there, private organizations. So, who can get aid? Who should apply for financial aid? This is one thing I hear almost every single year from some family at some point in time. They may say something like, oh, I'm not going to apply for financial aid. We make too much money. So, my opinion, absolutely everybody should apply for financial aid. And it's very limited criteria, right? You just have to be a citizen, an eligible non citizen, have your high school diploma, be enrolled at least half time. But these last two can be a little bit tricky. So, attend an approved institution. So, since financial aid comes from the federal government, they approve the schools that are eligible for financial aid. Now, most people hear that and think, okay, this is limited to just a traditional 4-year college. An approved institution has a much broader definition. It can include things like community colleges, trade schools, and believe it or not, even schools outside of the US. So if you're thinking of sending your student, maybe to a school in Canada or somewhere over in Europe, you can get federal financial aid to cover those costs and help you out. Um, Maintaining satisfactory academic progress. That's kind of a key one for financial aid. We're going to talk about later on in the presentation how you're going to be offered financial aid. Some of it can sometimes be tied to that student maintaining a minimum grade point average when they're in school. So it's very important to kind of pay attention to that fine print sometimes. You may see it that the student might have to maintain a 3.0 or higher for the next 4 years to continue to get the aid they've been offered in that freshman year. But again, absolutely everybody should apply for financial aid, and everybody is going to get at least some of those federal student loans. Even if your income is really high, I could say, even Bill Gates could apply for it. And Bill Gates could qualify for low interest rate loans from the federal government to pay for college. So, not that he needs it, but point is, everybody can get at least those loans.
So,
So, yep.
excuse me. Well, we're seeing a little notice on our screen that says Zoom app is sharing your screen. Can you hide that by any chance? It sometimes blocks
Oh,
some.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep, I see it down at the bottom.
Yeah, it kind of blocks
Got it.
some of it. Thanks.
Yep, yep. Okay. So there are up to 2 forms needed to apply for financial aid. Every college is gonna make you fill out the FAFSA form. That's the free application for federal student aid. Good news is where I talked about earlier, you can get financial aid from those 3 levels. This one form, one FAFSA form is gonna serve as one application to all 3 levels of financial aid, and it's free to file. So, every college you're thinking of attending is gonna require the FAFSA form to be eligible for financial aid. In addition to that, there's a second form called the CSS profile form. Now, that's only required by a very small number of colleges, around roughly 250, mostly private colleges, but I have seen some state colleges out there occasionally. And it's the gateway to the aid from that individual college. So it doesn't affect what you are going to get from the federal government or the state government, but it absolutely has a major impact on aid you would get from that particular college. So it's not free to file, small charge per college that's out there. How do you know if you have to do this second form? Well, the best thing to do is go to the website, the College Board. Lots of seniors may already be familiar with this website. Simply visit the website, go to the CSS profile section, and they have a listing of all the schools alphabetically that require this second form. You can also visit each individual college's website. If you're on their website, go to their financial aid section, and they're going to tell you what forms you need to fill out to apply for financial aid. And they will list the CSS profile form there as well. So everybody does the FAFSA, and a few of you are also going to have to do the CSS profile form. My presentation is largely focused on the FAFSA form, but I'm going to touch on the CSS profile form a couple of times because there's a few things that are a little unique about it. All right, this is one of my favorite slides, the financial aid timeline. It's going to set up your milestones so you're going to know what you need to do, when you need to do it, and then what's going to happen afterwards. So the 2 forms you need to fill out, the FAFSA and the CSS profile form if you have to. They go live or become available on October 1st. Last 2 years, this form has been delayed significantly. This year, it is scheduled to be launched on time on October 1st. So it's good news this year that the form is coming out on time. So that's when you can go out and fill out the form after it becomes available. So you fill out your financial aid forms in the kind of overlapping or in the background. You're also applying for acceptance into college. So really, a next big milestone is getting that acceptance letter, which comes out in the springtime. You know, the good old congratulations letter. Hey, I got into college. And then a very important thing is going to happen following your acceptance. Usually, about a month after that, you're going to get what's called a financial aid offer from that college that you got into. And then the next thing on the timeline is going to be May 1st, traditional decision day. So that's a day where you have to say, hey, you know, I've decided to send my student to your school. We're coming next semester. Here's a deposit. Hold my seat. We're coming. And then based on that, a student's then going to go out, go through orientation at college, sign up for meal plans, dorm rooms, classes. Based on all those elections, the school prepares their specific bill and sends it out, believe it or not until June, July, or even as late as August. So funding the education, paying for that college education is one of the last things that happen. And some of these timelines can be bumped up a little bit sooner if your student is doing such things as early action or early decision. They may come a little sooner. The forms are not available until after October 1st, but acceptance and award letters might come out a little sooner if you're doing early action and early decision. So, types of financial aid. There are different types of financial aid you can get after you fill out the FAFSA form and the CSS profile. You can get gift aid like scholarships, grants, or awards. Examples you could see are things like a Pell Grant from the federal government. You could see what's called the Mass Grant from the Mass state government. You could even see Teach grants from the federal government. Scholarships, you can see a lot mostly from the individual college, but you can do, and in my opinion, I'll spend a few minutes talking about scholarships here, and then you can jump in with anything that's specific to the high school for resources. But scholarships are something you have to look for outside of this financial aid process. In my opinion, something you should do, from that senior year in high school all the way up until that last year the student is in college. There are lots of companies, private individuals, private organizations that offer scholarships to help you pay for college. But you have to do the research. You have to go out and search for scholarships. You have to go out and submit applications to get a chance to win them. So, there are resources for you that are available for scholarships. We do about a 1 hour webinar that teaches you little tips and tricks to try to increase your chances of winning, organizing your search a little bit better, getting prepared before you go out and start applying for scholarships. Because it can get a little overwhelming and frustrating sometimes going through the process. So you want to do things like look for maybe small scholarships, instead of applying for something like a $50,000 academic scholarship that has a lot of people competing for it, could be very tough to win. Instead, look for a lot of smaller scholarships on a local level, maybe things offered by your local VFW club. Those have less people competing for them, and you've just automatically increased your chances of winning that scholarship. So keep those in mind. Scholarships are a great resource. You can find scholarship resources at the College Board. You can look at your individual university as well. They will have a list of scholarships that are available. You can do what I call Googling for dollars by going out and looking for scholarships on the internet. When you do that type of stuff, I always say make sure to spend a little bit of time up front to include some keywords in your search. Those don't just, type in scholarships. You're going to get a couple million hits that are very easily, you're going to get overwhelmed. But you want to type in things that are very specific to your student, a student who served for his church and taught CCD, maybe worked in a local food bank, volunteered there, is left-handed, likes to play tennis, wants to be a nurse. Anything whatsoever that you can use to expand the definition of the scholarship and really narrow it down to something your student's going to be eligible for and have a chance to win. And of course, you can also get some help from local high school as well. So
That's my cue, right? Donald,
that's
my
your cue. You got it.
All right. So for us, there's a couple of different ways that we keep kids informed. So for Everything College, each of the classes has a Google Classroom that the kids have the contact information, how to get on. I think everybody essentially is on. They should be as juniors and seniors at this point. So we will put up any scholarships that come kind of across our desk from different agencies or different organizations. So, that are more state or, more nationwide. So we'll put those up. Oftentimes a list will come up every once in a while too, as we gather that information. On the Naviance page, there's also a list of scholarships there. So you can get them in that manner. So those larger kind of like, we take out some of the Google search that you have to worry about. It's because it'll be listed. But the main thing that we do in terms of the high school is that every February, right before February vacation, we'll do an assembly and we will go through how to apply for the Norton-based scholarships. So we have, I don't know, somewhere around 70, depends on the year, different organizations that reach out to us. Some of them are connected directly to the high school, like different boosters clubs and so forth. Others are individuals who have some family member that was once connected to Norton High School, for example, or lived in town, or was a teacher, or was a firefighter in the town, something like that, where they have scholarships that are available. So the way we do it is we do a presentation. We sort of talk to kids about it. This one Google form takes them about an hour and a half to fill out, including an essay. And as they go through, they kind of can decide what their might be eligible for. So again, it's like they don't have to do 50 different applications. You just do the one. And then we take that and break it down based on the criteria of the different organizations. Some of those folks want to review the scholarships themselves. Others ask us to do it. So we have a scholarship committee, review the criteria that each scholarship has, and the students are chosen from there. One of the things we stress over and over again is that, this isn't for the top 20. It is for all of our students. Some of our scholarships are very specific. I use the example of a firefighter. So if you're a son, a daughter of a firefighter, or granddaughter, grandson of a firefighter, that kind of thing, that would move you to the top of the list. So you may be the only one in your class that meets that criteria. And then we also stress that it is not just for students who are going to a 4-year college. Some of them are geared to its students that are going to a 2-year community college. Some are geared to its trade schools, and so forth. So we really try to get everybody to apply, because you kind of never know. Every year, almost without fail, somebody that should have qualified for a scholarship does not, because they don't fill out the form or they don't hit submit. So we really stress with the students. We do this usually the week before February vacation, gives them all of February vacation, and then it's typically due the day after, or the couple of days after February vacation, just in case they ran into any issues. So that's the process. That you'll be receiving more information, after the holidays. Your students will be receiving more information after the holidays as well. We do have some questions, Donald. I don't know if we want to take these now or save them for the end.
Sure, we can take them now.
All right. The first one is, I've heard that some aid via FAFSA is first come, first serve. Is this also the case for the CSS profile?
So no, that's one of kind of my favorite myths that are out there. Aid is generally not first come, first serve. So a lot of people hear that date, October 1st, the form is available, and they may rush out there to get it done at midnight and fill it out. It's going to be based on your financial household situation, is really what the aid is based on. There is some deadlines for financial aid you want to pay attention to. I do have a slide that talks about that later, but basically between October 1st and what we're going to say is your school's or the college's priority deadline date for filing financial aid, you want to make sure you have your forms filed by that date. Now, what happens is the federal money and the state-based money 100% gets awarded based on your financial situation. There are few states with limited budgets that if you happen to have a very strong financial need, that they may hand out their money on kind of a first come, first serve basis. It runs out. So if you're in line first, you're still going to get what you get based on your financial situation. You're not going to get more or less. You're just going to get it potentially before the state runs out of their money. That's really the exception. Everybody else, as long as you get it done by the school's priority deadline date, you're going to get the most amount of aid. The way the schools work is they have a budget of financial aid. They have this pile of money to hand out. After their priority deadline date is passed, They go in and look at all of their accepted students and they start handing out money. So you want to be in line when they're starting to hand out money and it's as big as possible. But just because you fill out the form first doesn't mean you're getting money. It just means you're going to be in the best position possible to maximize what you might get. Um, but again, as long as you're meeting the school's priority deadline date for financial aid, you're going to hit every state deadline date, federal government deadline date, and you'll be in the best shape possible to get financial aid. But you don't have to panic and run out and fill it out as soon as the form becomes available.
All right, we have another one. When you reference state aid, does this mean aid from your resident state or the state where you attend college, university, et cetera?
State in which you reside in.
All right. And then the last one, Vinny, can you say which form this is again? I'm assuming, Amy, you mean the Google form. So the students will be receiving a Google form specific to the scholarship. So this will all be covered. We're going to do a PowerPoint presentation and assembly. We'll go through all of that, and you'll get an email from me to the parents, basically saying, please make sure your students fill out the Google form. That's for the Norton Scholarship. So hopefully I clarified that. Amy, if it's something different, let me know. All right, moving on. I think that's all our questions right now.
All right, perfect. So other than the great free money, the gift aid, there's also that self-help aid, work study jobs, federal financial aid loans. And then you can go on your own and look at state-based loans or even private loans from private individual banks. So here we go. Okay. So we talked about the scholarships. We talked about our grants or awards. The federal work study program, one type of aid that's out there. You may know your student, maybe they're also an athlete, or they need to focus on their studies. So you might not want them to work, but if you think your student is going to work, there is a federal work study program, which is really part-time jobs around the college campus. Great jobs to get because they're geared towards students and they help pay for everyday expenses. But it can be based on financial needs. So another reason why you want to fill out that FAFSA form, if you want one of these good jobs around the college campus, filling out the FAFSA gets you access to it. You don't have to be limited to the federal work study jobs. There are lots of businesses that spring up around the college campuses, from restaurants to retail shops. So students can always go out on their own and get their own jobs. But the federal work study are definitely good jobs that are out there. So the types of loans, unfortunately, my slide is starting to look a little bare here because some of the changes the current administration is putting in as some of the federal student loans are being discontinued. Specifically, the graduate federal loan programs are no longer going to be available. But you can still get the direct student loans as a result of filling out the FAFSA form. So in my day, these were called the Stafford loans. They're the same type of loan coming from the federal government. They just have a different name that's out there. There's also PLUS loans for parents that are available. And then again, you can get private loans outside on your own. In Massachusetts, we have a state-based loan program called MEFA, Massachusetts Educational Finance Authority. But then you can look at private banks as well to help pay for college that's out there. So getting ready to apply. So now I'm going to kind of talk about my 3 easy steps. The number one thing I want everybody to do, and everybody's going to have to do, is getting a federal user ID and password. This is known as your federal student aid ID. Very important. Going to need to do it at studentaid.gov. So that's the first step of the process. Second thing, before you go in to fill out these forms, you want to gather your information. Get everything ready ahead of time so when you log in to go fill out the FAFSA form or the CSS profile, you'll be ready to go. Research your financial aid deadline. So we talked about that with that great question, and I'll expand upon it a little bit. But that's really the third step. Know when you have to get this form filled out by. So, step one, getting the federal student aid ID. You need to do this for the student, and then you need to do it for at least one parent, or what they've introduced in the last 2 years is language which they call the contributor, meaning who's contributing the most to that student's financial support. And that'll come into play the next slide or two. But why get this student aid ID? Why do you need to create a username and password? Number one, it allows you to sign into the FAFSA. So the student needs it to sign in, and then the parent needs to sign in. The ID itself, like most things, does a two-factor authentication process these days. So when you're creating your user ID and password, they're going to ask you to verify your email and verify your cell phone number. Please make sure you do both, because in the unlikely event you forget your username and password, because you've had those things verified, you're going to be able to very quickly unlock your username and password and reset it. But the two-factor authentication, what they do is after you log in, they send a code to the phone or your email that you have to enter that code in. Again, another process I think everybody's very familiar with these days, but most important thing that comes out of this ID is after you create this ID and submit or create your account, in the background, behind the scenes, the federal government is checking you against the Social Security Administration to verify you are who you say you are. So they're doing a background check on you to make sure you're not somebody committing identity theft or anything like that. Very important that you go through this and clear that process. Also, this ID is going to allow you to sign for any federal student loans electronically. So, any loan you ever borrow, you have to sign a contract for that loan. With your ID, you can do it all electronically. And then it gives, most importantly, the student access to all their loan information and their grant information after they graduate. So, they graduate, they need to know, hey, who do I have to pay back? When am I going to have to pay them back? How much do I owe them? They have their username and password. They can very quickly find out who they have to pay, how to contact them, and make sure they stay on top of repaying their student loans. So you're going to create this student aid ID, same website, studentaid.gov. You're just going to go up into the top right hand corner and it says create an account. And you're going to go out and do it for the student, log out, and then go back in and do it a second time and create it for at least one parent. And I'll talk about a little bit more if there's some situations where maybe two parents need to do it. But most situations, it's going to be just one parent needs to create a username and password at this account at this site as well. So, second thing, step two in my easy process to get you ready to apply for financial aid is gathering the information you need to apply. And I always, no matter how many times I see this in writing, I still do a double check. But yes, we're in 2025. Your high school senior will be filling out what's called the 2026-2027 FAFSA form. And in order to do that, the documents you will need are your 2024 federal income tax returns and 2004 W 2 statements. It's what we call a 2-year look back. They are looking back 2 years to see what your income is for that FAFSA form, the 26-27 FAFSA you're filling out. If you have any untaxed income, not too common, but again, you'd also want to make sure anything related to income comes from the year 2024. Everything else you're going to need to gather is going to be real-time information. So you're going to want to gather information on your assets. And on my next slide, I'm going to go into a little more detail about what assets you're going to need to count and what assets you don't count. But you'll need things like your checking and savings accounts. So you're going to need to know really what the balance is. You're not going to need to provide a statement. You're not going to need to provide account numbers, anything like that. You just simply need to know, hey, my checking account as of today has 5,000 in it. My savings account has 10,000. So in your FAFSA form, when it comes to checking and savings, you just enter 15,000. It's going to be that clean and simple for you. But it's always defined as real time, meaning the day you are filling out the FAFSA form. They want to know what the balances are then on that day. And of course, you're going to need basic demographic information, social security numbers, dates of birth, addresses, um, emails, phone numbers, that sort of thing. So gather all this information ahead of time, and you'll be in great position to do um, the FAFSA form when it comes. So the deadlines, visit every single college. This is step 3 that you're thinking of applying to. Say if you have 8 colleges, go to every college, visit their financial aid section on the college's website, and look up what they call their priority deadline date. They will list it. They were going to have a deadline date out there for when they want you to submit this FAFSA form and CSS profile form. That's the real important date everybody needs to kind of pay attention to. Now, on the college's website, you're going to see this can be broken down by admission. The students doing early action, it could be an earlier deadline date. If they're doing regular decision, it could be a later deadline date. So visit all your colleges, write down all the deadline dates, look at the earliest deadline date, and then you're going to fill out, make sure your FAFSA form is filled out and submitted before that date. And when you do the FAFSA form, you're filling out one form and you're listing up to 20 colleges to receive that one form. So include all your other schools at that time. You're now going to be way ahead of their schedule, and you're going to make sure you've gotten the earliest deadline date taken care of. Federal deadline, you don't have to worry about. The federal deadline, believe it or not, is a month after the school year ends. You can do it, the earlier the better. It's not going to get you the most amount of money, but it does put you in the best position possible to try to kind of maximize what you're going to be awarded based on your financial situation. Um, it is one of those things that weighs on everybody's mind, so it doesn't hurt to get it done sooner. It can just be one thing you can get off your checklist and say, all right, I got that done. I don't have to worry about it anymore. So um, don't worry about getting it done a little bit sooner. So where do you go to apply? You're going to go to the same website where you created your ID, studentaid.gov. And I have a snapshot of what it looks like. So when you are searching online, you'll be familiar and have a little bit of comfort that you're in the right place. So then this should become available tomorrow. A FAFSA form is something you're going to have to fill out every single year. So you have to fill out every year for the next 4 years. Freshman year is probably the most important because they have these deadline dates. Once your student is in college and you're filling it out in the sophomore year, the deadline dates for filling out the FAFSA form get bumped back, usually to around May 1st sometime. So it's a little bit easier and a little less stressful than year 2. But yeah, you're going to have to fill it out every single year. So when you're going into the FAFSA form, it's important to note that this is a student-based form. It's the student asking for financial aid to help pay for their college education. So a lot of the language is directed or worded like the student is the one filling it out. So just read some of the questions very carefully to make sure you're answering the way they would like you to. There are questions about the parents' income and assets and that same demographic information. But most importantly, the form is now separated into 2 sections, the student section and the parent section. So the student's going to log into the FAFSA, do theirs, log out, parent logs in and does their section of the form. You can do it either way. You could do the parents first and then the student second, or you could do the student section first and then the parent section. either way, they kind of what they do is when you fill out the student section, they ask you about parents, and then an email gets sent to the parent so they can go out and finish their half of the FAFSA form. So I recommend doing it as the parent first and then the student second. Reason being, because it's a student-based form, they give the results of the FAFSA form to the student. So if you fill out the student first, exit out, and then log back in as a parent and fill out the form, when you submit it and it's all done, you don't get any results back. You just get something say, hey, you've successfully submitted your form. But when the student is the last party to fill out the form, they're going to get a congratulations message and they're going to instantly get the results of the FAFSA form displayed to them. And those results consist of a key information called the Student Aid Index. And we'll even give an estimate of what the student qualifies for from the federal government, not the state government or the college, but they will know instantly an estimate of what they get from the federal government in financial aid. So do it that way. I find it works better. Plus, a lot of the parent information asks you about the student. So then when you log in as the student, a lot of your pages are already pre-filled and done, which is great, saves you work. So one question that comes up every single year in the case of divorced or separated parents, whose information needs to go into the FAFSA form? So the way they define it, they want to know who the custodial parent is based on who's providing the most financial support. So if the parents are separated, the student needs to fill out the FAFSA form. Only one of the two parents in a divorced or separated situation needs to fill out the FAFSA form, and that's the one providing the most financial support. If a parent gets remarried after their divorce, it's not going to be now that single parent. It's going to be that single biological parent along with their new step parents if they are remarried. So now you're going to have two parents that need to fill out the FAFSA form. So there is information when you're going through the FAFSA form that always pops up on the right-hand side. They even have a live chat. So if you get stuck on a question, you can very quickly pop into a chat with one of their representatives from the Department of Education and get your questions answered and complete the process and kind of not get bogged down. So when you're looking at your assets on what you're including and not including, this is one where I get a ton of questions related to the FAFSA form. So I like to start with the not included because those are big ones. So you're not going to include your primary residence. The equity of you have in your house is a protected asset, does not go into the FAFSA form. Any type of retirement account, 401ks, IRAs, pensions, annuities, all retirement accounts are protected from the FAFSA form and you do not include them. If you have whole life insurance that has a cash value, also a protected asset, and you do not include it. And, for most families, that's where a lot of their money is in their primary residence and their retirement accounts, and you're not going to have to count those. What you will have to count and include are things like real estate for other properties. So if you have an investment property, a vacation home, rental properties, you're going to want to know the equity in those. Trust funds, universal gift to minor and universal transfer to minor accounts, not too common anymore, but they pop up. Money markets, CDs, mutual funds or stocks or bonds that are not in retirement accounts. So if you just had $20,000, went to a financial advisor, they put it in some Apple stock for you, you're going to have to include that value that's out there. 529 college savings plans, you do need to include those in the FAFSA form. But important to note, that's included on the parental side in most cases. It's not going to be on the student's FAFSA section. It's going to be under the parent section of the FAFSA form. So I talked earlier a little bit about the CSS profile form. One of the things about it is completely different when it comes to assets. So basically all the stuff that's on the not included for the FAFSA form, it is included in the CSS profile form. They want to look at absolutely everything. They'll actually even look for a lot more than what you see on these two slides. But no, if you're doing that CSS profile form, you're going to need to gather ahead of time information on all of these things. So earlier, I kind of had highlighted, you're applying for the 26, 27 FAFSA form and you're using your 2024 income. There are processes to try to address situations where your income, your current income, is not reflected on your 24 tax return, right? So, that was a couple of years ago. Maybe something unfortunate's happened. The parent's been laid off, or maybe they've had their hours cut down from 40 hours a week down to 20 hours a week. If there are any unique financial circumstances that are not reflected in your FAFSA form based on your income and your assets, you can try to address that directly with the college's financial aid office. They do have a process called professional judgment, where if you explain to them and can document to them how your current financial situation is worse off than what it was in 2024, they can make adjustments. They have the authority to do that. So know if you have that, and it's not necessarily limited income. Maybe this could be a medical expenses. Maybe one of the two parents is very ill, and all of a sudden your family's facing large medical bills of thousands of dollars every single month. That can also be used in this exception process, but you've got to make the school aware of it and give them the chance to take it under consideration. But they do have the final say and judgment in this. So if they say no, they're not making any adjustments. That's really what it comes down to. But no, you can address this with each individual college you're applying for. Once you've been offered some financial aid, go talk to them about anything that may be dramatically different. So, what is the financial aid process? So, what happens after you file your FAFSA form? Basically,
Sorry to interrupt. Before we do this, we do have a bunch of questions that might make sense to answer now.
perfect. Yeah, go
All
right
right.
ahead.
So number one, some programs are 5-year programs, architecture, special ed, nursing, etc., where the student gets a bachelor's and a master's in 1 year. Would they be able to get loans for the 5th year, or is this the type of loan that was eliminated?
So, they will be able to get one type of loan. So, the loan they get on undergraduate, which is a small amount, the unsubsidized loan, graduate students can still get an unsubsidized loan, but it's capped at $20,500. There was what's called a grad plus loan that a graduate student could borrow that was uncapped. So most graduate students in the past would get that $20,500 unsubsidized loan, and whatever was left, they would do the grad plus loan. That's what's gone away, is that grad plus loan. They can still get the unsubsidized student loan for 20,500.
All right. The next one is this goes back to like parents that are separated and so forth. What if separated parents are 50-50? I'm assuming in
So
custody.
yeah, so then the government and the schools really kind of leave the determination up to you. If it's a 50-50 split, I would say the only thing that they would potentially look at is who is claiming the student as a dependent on their tax return. So if the parents are split, they're filing their taxes separately, and it's really a 50-50 share, look at the tax return, who claimed that student as a dependent, and use them as the custodial parent.
All right. Thank you. All right. Then how about a 529 from a grandparent?
So that's a great change that has happened. One of the new changes this year is grandparents' gifts are no longer included in the FAFSA form. And a gift could be just simply cash gift, or a 529 savings plan. So that no longer goes into the FAFSA form. The CSS profile form, totally different. Again, they pretty much ask for absolutely everything. But as far as the FAFSA form moving forward, that is now excluded from the FAFSA.
All right, two more. I have heard that the CSS is beneficial for states like Massachusetts where the cost of living is high, so higher incomes are not considered so high, resulting in more need-based aid. Is this the case through your experience?
So, not need-based aid, because again, I define need-based aid as the aid from the federal government and the state governments. That's solely based on the federal formulas. The CSS profile form is the college basically uses their own mathematical formulas to determine your need. And yes, that's going to include the cost of living in the state you're in. So those particular schools could have a more favorable formula because they know how much it costs in Massachusetts and that state. They're very attuned to those things and they're trying to be as fair as possible. So it will affect their aid that they're giving you from the college, but it really has absolutely no bearing on the federal financial aid or any state aid.
And the last one so far, I am the legal guardian of my grandson until the age of 18. Post 18, does his biological parents become the contributor parent for the FAFSA?
No, so that's a great question. When you're filling out the FAFSA form and there's going to be a series of questions that asks if the student is going to be what we call a dependent or an independent student. So a dependent student has to fill out the FAFSA form with their parental information in it. An independent student fills out the FAFSA form with solely the student's information. And if the student was ever in a legal guardianship prior to turning age 18, that will make them an independent student and they only need to provide their information. Be prepared to provide documentation of that legal guardianship. Schools will sometimes ask for their files in case they get audited. But yeah, absolutely. In that case, the student will not have to provide their biological parents' information, just solely the students.
And that's all our questions for right now. I'll let you continue. Thank you.
All right, perfect. So basically, after you file your FAFSA and you hit that submit button, the Department of Education calculates what they call your student aid index. It's a very critical number that all the schools are going to use, except for the CSS profile schools, and it drives the financial aid process. So this student aid index and all the data you put into the FAFSA gets sent to every school you listed out there. And the schools are going to use it to prepare a financial aid award letter, which comes out in the springtime. And each individual college is going to have a financial aid award letter. They all going to look slightly different and come out on slightly different dates. But that's really why you're filling out the FAFSA form. So you get this student aid index and all your financial data gets sent to the colleges. So why is it the student aid index important and how does it drive the process? So it used to be called your expected family contribution. It's still the same thing and used in the same way, but they've changed the name to student aid index, largely because it's not a realistic number. When you see this number, people go, huh, and the expected family contribution states it as that's how much you as a family could contribute to the cost of college next year. It's not a realistic number. It's generally a very high number, or it could be 32,000 per year. Families don't have 32,000 per year to pay for college. So because of the confusion, they've changed the naming to a student aid index. And it follows a federal formula to calculate this number set from our federal government or the Department of Education. But why it's critical is this is how the schools are going to use it. So they're going to look at the cost of attendance, which is everything: room, board, meal plans, books, you know, every expense. So kind of that big scary number when you go look at the cost of a college and it says we're $85,000 next year, that's considered cost of attendance. They minus out your student aid index from your FAFSA form. That difference is your financial need. And each school will use it with this following formula. And I have a couple schools listed here, 3 schools. One is 54,000 a year, the other one's 30, and all the way up to the last school is $80,000 a year. So if your student aid index was, for example, this 17,164, minus it from the cost of the school, and you can see your demonstrated financial need is the difference. So school A, you have a financial need as third defined as $37,000 a year. School B, very small financial need. Your financial need is 12,000 a year. The last school, school C, you have a very strong financial need, $63,000 a year. Why is that important to know what your financial need is? Some schools will advertise on their website, hey, we strive to meet 100% of our family's financial need. Meaning, if you're going to school C and your financial need is 63,000 a year, that school is saying they're trying to come up with $63,000 in financial need for you to go to that school next year. Some schools will say, hey, we meet 75% of our family's financial need, or we meet 50% of financial need. They're all different, but this is how they use the formula. Once they look at your financial need, they now compare your financial need to all the other families at their school. And that's how that school determines who they're giving their financial aid to. So, school C, even though it starts at $80,000 a year, you could get a lot of financial aid from that school. School B, you're probably not going to get a lot of financial need from that school. I'll say these are pretty close to some real life examples. School B can be a state school, and I've seen people in this type of situation, and then the financial aid that they actually get offered from that school is very little to almost nothing. But school C offers a lot of financial aid. So very important to note, I think when you're looking at colleges, don't get scared away by the cost of the college. If you look at a college and it says it's $88,000 a year, don't go, hey, we're not applying to that college because we can't afford that. You're going to go through this financial aid process and you can be surprised. So if your student can get into that school, it's a good fit for that school, that the student, they want to go to that school, absolutely apply for admission and go through the financial aid process. Um, this is kind of a real life example from my son. He had kind of 2 schools in each category. And once we went through the financial aid process, the out of pocket cost, once financial aid was factored in between school B and school C, was $2,500 a year. There was not a huge difference. But if you look at their list price of 30,000 a year and 80,000 a year, that's a big difference. Financial aid can even that out. It's not always going to be the case, right? Be prepared to have a conversation. We might not be able to afford this school, but don't rule it out until you go through the financial aid process. All right, so the award letters come out during the springtime. One thing I like to point out to families is they're not set in stone. You can sometimes negotiate these letters. It's not like negotiating at a car dealership. You can't go in and, have this aggressive back and forth and talk to the manager and his manager to try to get a better deal. But if you have some similar colleges and you want to go to school A, but school B is offering you a lot more financial aid, you can absolutely go back to school A and say, hey, we really want to come here, but this other school is offering us more money. So it's going to be difficult financially for us to afford your school. Is there anything else you can do before we make up our decision and put down our deposit on that May 1st deadline date? So as long as you're asking in the right way, never hurts to ask. You're not going to get Boston University or a Northeastern University, which has 60,000 people applying for 2,000 seats. You're not going to get them to kind of negotiate against a UMass. But if you have similar level schools, maybe a small regional school, with under 1,000 students, they could be very willing to negotiate sometimes. Um, so know that, um, you know, but colleges, once they give you these award letters, they want you to go into their website and accept them and say, yes, I'm accepting your aid offer, meaning because they're going to include all those different levels, right? The federal government loans, any state loans, and they want to see what you're accepting, and maybe denying. You don't have to accept all their offer. Maybe you've got a really great financial aid offer and you have some good savings, and maybe you can go out and deny some of the loans and just rely on the scholarships. But don't be afraid to negotiate and ask for more money. Um, I've seen this happen. I've seen somebody go back to a school. A student asked 4 times individually for more money. The first 3 times they gave that student another $2,000 a year. The fourth time they said, "That's it. That's our best offer. Take it or leave it if you can't afford it." Unfortunately, it is what it is. But you got another $6,000 a year simply by asking to go to school, right? That's a lot of money. That adds up over 4 years. So
And
can't.
Donald, for those out there who have seen some of our presentations on the college application process and so forth, we talk a lot about making sure that students go and visit and show the interest, go to the different days, get a tour, make sure they're on the website, do all the things to show that they're interested. Um, touch base at the college fair, all of those kinds of things. With the schools really do keep track of that, because I think I had it happen with my own son. He went to his college, he did all the things, did all the tours, did an interview. So when he went back and said, "Well, it's between you guys and this, they offered me a little bit more. Can you match it?" Um, Much to my surprise, they actually did match the offer, and I think it came down to the fact that he had gotten to know the admissions rep pretty well. That he had lots of data, and I've seen that with other kids too. So it's not just about doing that to get acceptance. It might come back, hey, this person's really interested, and I think they want, especially the schools you're talking about, they want to make sure you get there, not just that they accepted you, but that you're going to show up and attend and pay the bill, right? So I think not just for the acceptance, but for these kinds of things, it is really important to show interest in the schools you are really interested in.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think one of the best ways today to do that is colleges, just like any other business, they're all about the data and the analytics. So they're watching and they can pull reports and see how many times you visit their website and what pages you're going to on their website. So simply, if you have interest in a college, not only from an admissions, but from getting more financial aid, keep visiting that website multiple times. That's going to show up and they can quickly measure how serious you are about going to that college by how many times you visit their website and look at all their different pages. So, a great point, but that's also another great way to show that interest in your intent to go to that school to help increase your chances for both. All right, so the CSS profile form, if you have to do it, you go to the college board. You can quickly look up the colleges to see if they're there. Um, Profile schools will also want you to fill out that FAFSA form. So any of these schools, you need to do both forms, the FAFSA and the CSS profile form. Um, Usually this form, sometimes it's done, well, most of the cases, it's done as a freshman year activity. You fill out the CSS profile form 1 year. You don't have to fill it out in subsequent years. Although I have lately seen a lot of colleges start to ask for it on a yearly basis. Um, so funding college tuition, how are you going to pay the tuition bill when it comes, right? Now that you've gone through the financial aid process, you've gotten some award letters from colleges, and that's really the first time, right, when you can see your bottom line. Hey, this is how much the college cost. This is how much aid I'm going to get. What's left is what you have to come up with as a family. So how are you going to come up with that? How are you going to cover that gap between what the college cost and the financial aid? You can use your past income, so savings plans, 529 savings plans, any other investment you've been using, even if it's a simple savings account. You want to use all those resources first. They're your cheapest and your least expensive. And you can use present income as well. This is kind of a shocker to everybody, but present income. So if you owe the school, for example, after financial aid is factored in, maybe you owe the school $5,000. You don't have to borrow loans at all. You could simply sign up for a payment plan and make installments of what you owe the school directly to the college. So, in the case of $5,000, you could sign up for maybe a 10-month payment plan. And now you're going to pay the school $500 a month for the next 10 months. And that takes care of the bill and what you owe that particular school. Great way to avoid interest charges. Lots of people think, oh, I'm not going to have the cash flow for this, but it's kind of shocking. I know as a parent, once the student moves out of the house, somehow you end up with a little more cash flow. It seems counterproductive or intuitive because your kid's off in college and you've got tuition bills, but your grocery bill is going to go down. Electricity bill is going to go down. Less time they're going, hey, can I borrow $50 or I need some gas money? All those expenses go down. And believe it or not, your cash flow actually goes up a little bit. So why not redirect some of it to a payment plan? And then future income loans, right? The federal student loans we talked about earlier, private student loans, but also you don't have to look at student loans. Lots of families will look at things like home equity loans or lines of credit against that equity in their house. I'm not a huge fan of them, but lots of families look at them to fund their college education. And then, of course, tax deductions and credits. I'm not a tax professional, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through the details of tax breaks. But research publication 970 at irs.gov always gives you the most up to date information on what types of credits you can get, whether it's just for the expenses you pay out of pocket, the tuition you're paying out of pocket, interest you might be paying on student loans. Lots of ways you can get deductions and credits. If you have an accountant who does your tax returns, just let them know you have a student in college and they're going to be aware of everything that you can help save you some money on. So, talked a little bit earlier kind of about the loans. The financial aid loan, known as the subsidized and unsubsidized loans, and what the difference between that is, if you get a subsidized loan, it's interest free while the student's in college. Unsubsidized means interest is adding up on the loan while they're in college. Interest rates are set every single year. They can go up and they can go down. Currently, they're fixed at around 6.4%, but they go into a standard 10-year loan and no payments are due until 6 months after the student graduates. This is what I call the only true student loan. It's a loan that's in the student's name with no cosigner and no credit check and no income requirements whatsoever. So if you need to borrow money, you always want to borrow these loans first. Not a ton of money available in them. A freshman, the maximum they can get in the subsidized and unsubsidized combined, $5,500. Year two, as a sophomore, $6,500, and then in the junior and senior year, $7,500 each. The graduate students, they can get, as I mentioned earlier, up to that $20,500. But if your student is an independent student, which we mentioned earlier as well, they get slightly more in the subsidized and unsubsidized loan. It can be $9,500, $10,500, and then $12,500 in those last 2 years. So independent students get slightly more than dependent students, but it is limited. But again, if you get offered these financial aid loans, my best advice is take them if your plan includes borrowing money from one of those other sources at some point in time. You want to reduce what you need to borrow in those other sources as much as possible. So parents can also get what's called a Parent Plus loan. Now, um, when it comes to financial aid award letters, this is not something that can be offered or given or granted by a college. It is from the federal government, and it is something a parent has to go out and apply for and get their credit approved. But lots of colleges put it out on the award letters. So sometimes it gets confusing when it's out there because you think you've automatically got it, but you don't. You have to go out and apply for it separately. So again, the rates differ. Currently, that's 8.94%. Biggest thing about this loan is this is a loan that is in the parent's name. They are the only legal borrower of this loan. The student is not legally obligated to repay this loan. One huge change on this used to be kind of an uncapped loan. If you got approved for a Parent Plus loan and your school was $60,000 a year, and you needed 60,000 and your credit was approved, that's how much you were allowed to borrow, up to 60,000. So it's now going to be capped moving forward at $20,000 per year is the maximum a parent can borrow per student. And even worse, it's going to have an aggregate amount of 65,000. So if you need to borrow a $20,000 plus loan to pay that tuition bill, you're going to be fine in the freshman year, sophomore year, junior year. But when that senior rolls around, you're going to only be able to borrow $5,000 because you're going to be capped at 65,000. But it is a good loan to look at and consider when how are you going to pay that tuition bill? It's one thing you should review and have on your list of options that's out there. Then you can turn to private student loans. So you can go to banks, any banks that are out there offer private student loans, but now there are going to be lots of different terms and conditions that are available. So you want to go through things and ask, say, hey, well, who is the borrower? Is it the parent? Because you can borrow private student loans that are just in the parent's name, or you can borrow private student loans where the student is the primary borrower and the parent's the co-borrower. And maybe that's something you want as a family. Now, these loans will offer variable and fixed interest rates. Federal government loans are all just fixed rates, but now with private loans, you have some options. But you want to ask to see if there are any fees like origination fees, application fees, prepayment penalties. Repayment terms are a little broader now. Now you can do things like interest only, deferred. Um, you can even do immediate repayment on the loan. And then the terms can be very short, from 5 years to as long as 15 or 20 years. And even some private loans, sometimes they offer incentives for you to try to take their loans. So ask them if they have any benefits or any bonuses on why you should use their private student loan to help you fund the education. But if you turn to private student loans, always shop around for the best rate. Private loans give you interest rates based on the strength of your income and your credit. So shopping around is truly going to help you find the lowest interest rate. So those are the ways you can pay for college. Um, there are some cost cutting ideas. Um, so staying in state, that's obviously going to reduce tuition. Um, Regional discounts, sibling discounts. You can ask for things like that. Maybe you're going to send two kids to the same school, or maybe you have an aunt or an uncle, or you yourself graduated and attended that school. Ask colleges for those things. Sometimes they don't volunteer them, but if you ask, you may find you can get an additional discount for those things. One of my favorites is the New England Board of Higher Education. So what this is if your student lives in Massachusetts, say, and they're looking at studying a very unique major, and I'll use the example of my son. He wanted to become a mechanical engineering technology major. Well, it wasn't offered by any of the state schools in which we reside in, but it was offered by a surrounding state school. They did offer that particular major, but the state schools that I live in, they didn't offer that major. So through the New England Board of Higher Education, he got to pay a discounted tuition rate. He didn't pay full out of state. He got to pay kind of in between. So New England Board of Higher Education, it's a great way. I'd say on average, families can save around $7,500 a year by taking advantage of this program. But you can visit their website, look to see what majors are eligible at what state colleges. And of course, you can try to take college level exams early now and get college credits through advanced placement exams. And that's less credits you're going to have to pay for when the student is attending college. So if you can do that, that can help you save some money. Room and board options, if you're going to be a commuter instead of living on campus, that alone can cut your college tuition bill almost in half. Now, I understand maybe you're absolutely right. Living on campus is part of that experience, learning to live on their own. Absolutely, a lot of people want to, live on campus. So maybe look at living off campus in future years. A lot of colleges are going to have some restrictions that say you have to live on campus in the freshman year or in the sophomore year. So maybe you do that, but in the second year, move off campus. That alone, you can save. I'll probably use my son's example. He saved probably almost $5,000 a year by living off campus. So explore those options, maybe becoming a resident assistant. Some colleges will pay for all room and board expenses if your student is willing to become an RA on the college campus and spend a lot of their time helping other students navigate the campus life and becoming more accustomed to it and navigating any difficulties they may be having. So, cheaper meal plans do not, under any circumstances, am I saying starve your student. But if you have a student who's going to sleep until noon every day and they're not taking any classes that don't start until after 1 o'clock, don't buy the meal plan that includes breakfast. Maybe buy individual meal plans because your student's only going to do, lunch and dinner. Those are the only two meal plans they're going to do. So tailor it to your student. You can save some money there. Books and supplies. You can rent books. You can share books. Um, some professors may not even use the listed textbook, so you can check with a professor ahead of time and say, hey, are you going to use this textbook? Is it absolutely necessary? I have it for the class. And then the tax credits and the scholarship searching. Those are also two ways to help you offset the expensive cost of college. So just a few very quick ideas of ways that you can help save on the cost of college that's out there. So that's the end of my presentation. I want to thank everybody for kind of taking the time to listen to me talk tonight. Hopefully now you understand financial aid. You're ready to go out and apply for it. You know what's going to happen, and you can get yourself in the best position possible for paying for that education when the time comes. But of course, my information is out here. Anytime anybody has any follow-up questions, reach out at any time. I'm happy to assist any way I can.
We do have two questions that are on there right now. The
Okay.
first one is if the school claims to meet your financial need, do they include state and federal aid in that? Sorry.
Yes, they will
Or
always
just what the school offers.
they will always include the state and federal, whatever you qualify for. Um, but they don't really can't change or increase that amount. You're going to qualify what you qualify based on your financials from the federal and state. So it's the school's financial aid budget that they have the most control over. So when they're saying we strive to meet 100% of their need, they're going to include your federal and state aid, but they only have control over the school-based aid.
All righty. And then the other one, if a student has a bank account, is it beneficial to withdraw that money now so it will not be factored into financial aid?
So only if it's something significant. Um, if the student has a large sum of money out in there and you get it off the student's balance sheet per se, it can help. Every little bit can sometimes help, but if they've got a couple of $1,000s out there, don't worry about it. It's not going to make a significant difference in what you qualify for in financial aid.
All right. I think that's all our questions. Donald, as usual, I'd like to thank you for your insight and your expertise in this area. It's always so great to have you here so that our parents can learn about the whole process. As for the parents that are out there or that watch this afterwards, Donald is a great resource and has helped others after this presentation. So as he said, feel free to reach out. Again, I want to thank everybody for attending tonight. This will be, it has been recorded and it will be put up on the high school website under the guidance department. So feel free to watch it again and or let others know that it's up there. And with that, I will thank everybody and